Okay, so we're going to be working on our tree weaving today, and at this point your landscape painting should be ready. You added some details maybe in the last class, and then you used our template over top and you cut the notches in. There should be 10 across the top and 2 on the bottom, and we're ready to start warping our loom. Warping the loom means we're setting the loom up ready with some warp strings that are going to go this way, and then eventually we'll use the weft strings across this way to weave. So to set up warping your loom, I've prepared some brown yarn for all of you. You'll each get some of that today in class, and you're going to start with one end of it. We're going to look down at our bottom 2 notches here in the plate. The one in the left is going to be the one that goes in, and on the right, that's the side where we go out. So I'm going to flip it over and use some masking tape. It's nice and strong. Tape the end down underneath like so, and pull it up the outside. So I've got in and out, going in and going out. As I warp my loom, I want to make sure I don't pull my yarn too tightly, or else it's going to make the plate start to bend in. So here we go. I'm going to take my warping strand. I'm going to go up to the first notch here on the left. I'm going to go in. Then I'm going to come out of the next notch. Out. Now I go back down, and remember what I said at the beginning. At the bottom of the plate, you have in and out. In on the left, out on the right. So in and out. You want these to be straight, not droopy, but you don't want them too tight because that will bend your plate. So I went in and out on the bottom. Now back up to the top. I'm going to the next open notch. In. I pull it behind. You can see how it's catching on the back there. And out, the next one. Back to the bottom, in on the left, out on the right. Up to the top, looking for the next open notch, in and out. Back down to the bottom, in and out. Up at the top, in and out, and then back down to the bottom, in and out. Now we're almost finished. We're up at the top again, in and out, and back down to the bottom. Now at this point we need to create the trunk of the tree. We're not going to go back through down here. Before I create the trunk of the tree though, if you can see that this part of my plate is really bending in. I don't want it to bend in too much more because I really want that to stay smooth here. So one thing we can do with that is we could add some tape behind it. That would be masking tape. You could add some masking tape behind it to keep it from bending anymore and keep it together. And you could also press down on the plate or loosen up some of the strands if you needed to. So you've got your basic tree ready to go, and now we're going to work on the trunk. So I have extra yarn left over. It's coming in from my 10th notch over here. I'm going to wrap it around this portion of the yarns to pull them in, and as I pull that in, you'll see I'll be left with a trunk here and branches up top. Watch carefully as I wrap it. I'm going to pull these a little bit so that they come together, and I'm going to wrap the yarn over the whole bundle and pull it out underneath. And as I wrap this yarn around, let me get on this side. as I wrap this yarn around, it's going to pull the bottom of the strands together so that they start to build the trunk. I'm going to wrap it around again and again, but each time I wrap it, I don't want it to lay on top of the last wrapping. I want it to build above it, so I end up with row after row building up this way to make a trunk that's about 1 inch tall. Watch as I do that. Wrapping it over the top and back underneath. And as I lay this next one down, you look carefully, I'm being very careful to lay it on the next spot above it. Not really on top of it coming out at me, but building up the tree. Wrapping again and again. Can you see there how I have 4 strands, 4 wraps, and they build up the tree, not out as a thick trunk, but building up as a tall trunk. I'm going to keep wrapping that. I'd say go around about 10 times or so. And again, be careful how much you're pulling, because that can really start to bend this out of shape. So you want to be a little careful there. Not to pull it too tightly. Alright, so once I get to this point where I have about 10 rows of yarn here or so, I'm going to need to tie this off in a knot. Now, some of you might be more familiar with knots than others. So one way I can do this knot is that last wrap that I had. If I loosen that a smidge, I can take this tail end and poke it through that loop and pull. And that's a knot, but that's not going to be good enough for the whole thing. So I'm going to need to loop it under, and see the loop I have here? I'm going to put this tail end through that loop again. Now I have 2 knots. I think I might give it 1 more just for good measure. Underneath again, keep my loop, put the tail through the loop, and pull. So now I've got my branches, I've got my trunk, and I've tied the trunk off with a knot 3 times or so to make sure that that really is nice and snug. Then when I go to trim this, I'm not going to trim it exactly right up against the knot because I don't want it to come loose. I'm going to give it a little bit of a tail right there. Not too big, but just enough so I know that won't come loose. We could even add a little dab of glue there later and tuck that little tail behind just to really make sure that that stays snug forever for our art here. Alright, so now you know how to warp your loom, and the next time that we gather to talk, we're going to learn about weaving our loom with whatever yarn it is you choose.